This is the farmhouse where I grew up, where my father grew up, where my grandfather grew up, where my great grandfather grew up. The main house was built in 1860. We got electricity in 1943 with the Rural Electrification Act. And now what I am doing is I'm removing the majority of the 1960 updates and reverting the era back to somewhere between 1920 and 1950. I'm going to show you each room in the order that I did them years ago. While I am no more of a carpenter or a designer than any member of my family has ever been, I'm doing it to suit me and my tastes. One day my SO came to the farm and she had this green curved shelving unit that she got at a farm estate sale. And she said that I should put it in the living room. Well, it looked like the green ugly number 2 to me. So it sat for a few years, and finally, because I now was working a lot from home due to the pandemic, I needed an office in the living room. So I got the desk, I got the printer. Now I needed some shelving. So now that green ugly might actually be worth something. However, not in its current form. And as you can see, the vertical supports became the tiny little legs. So the first order of business was to do something about those tiny little legs. So I flipped it upside down, took a look at what I had, went to Home Depot and bought some off-the-shelf legs. Then I had to buy some 5/16 wood inserts because the legs had steel screws to screw it into furniture, and there was nothing on that underside of the green ugly to actually put those into, so I bought these brass inserts where you drill a hole, screw the insert onto the leg, crank the thing down until it's flush. Then when you back the leg out, the insert stays in the wood. So step 1 in the installation of the legs is chop off the little stub legs that were there. And then I inserted each brass insert onto the threaded center post of each leg. Then I drilled 3 holes, 1 in the back corner and 2 out on the curved corner ends, and screwed the leg with the insert on it down in, just like I said earlier. And because they had some cheap plywood on the back of the green ugly, I chipped some of that away so that I could get the leg to set down flat. Then flipped the green ugly over onto its legs and it sat level, which was surprising. Here's another angle of the legs. They don't look too bad for off-the-shelf legs. I think it tends to give it a lighter look than having it set directly on the floor like it did before. However, that cheap plywood backing had to go. So I got the idea to take some leftover beadboard from the bathroom, run it through the table saw, and get just the bead strips. And then put one on, then set another one as a spacer, and put the next one on so that they're spaced 1 bead strip apart. Then I proceeded to just work my way down the side of the green ugly until I reached the corner and one side was done. Then as I rounded the corner, I put 2 of the strips tight together and then got the normal spacing again and went all the way down to the other corner. And that's going to make it look a lot lighter than having that old plywood. May give it a little bit more interest too. With all the beadboard slats on, it doesn't look too bad. It looks a whole lot better than when I started. And when I'm finished, it may not be a green ugly anymore. And then I had to prime it, and little did I know what a job it was going to be priming that thing with each slat having to be painted on all 4 sides. It took forever. And then what I did was I test painted several of the slats trying to figure out what color I wanted it. And the last 2 that I put on was the antique, and that was the brown from the mudroom back in book 4, chapter 1. Next, I decided to put a little wall on the top so that things wouldn't slide off. I happen to have some ceiling pieces from the annex ceiling. That would be book 1, chapter 2. So I took those pieces and I went ahead and carefully brad nailed them right on the very edge where the slats came up flush with the top, as you can see, and it gave me kind of a little wall to prevent the stuff from sliding off. So then that had to be sanded and primed because it had I think it was a tung oil finish on it. So to get the primer to stick, we had to sand and prime it. Then I started the miserable process again of painting that thing. But every one of the slats had to be painted on all 4 sides. And again, it took forever. And there is the finished product, our corner shelving unit, setting right next to the printer. So I can put my office stuff on it. And with the slats and the legs, it looks far better than it did when it came into the house as the Green Ugly number 2. And if you want to see what we called Green Ugly number 1, that would be back in book 8, chapter 17.